So if you'll notice it, in our today's class, we are going to study the very important concepts of Mendel's contribution regarding the inheritance of traits. Means in the sense of like inheritance of traits means, as we know that how this genetically the information is transforming from one generation to the next generation. So he has been observed some and he has been done some experiments in his garden with the pea plants. So, and he has been suggested some laws which is applicable the same thing to the animals, including the human beings. In last class, I told you why he has been chosen the pea plant and as well as what do you mean by the hybrid. And same way we have studied monohybrid inheritance and as well as dihybrid inheritance. So now, first of all, coming to here, today's class we'll see the rules for the inheritance of traits. First, before going to study the rules for the inheritance of traits, let us understand what do you mean by inheritance of traits. So can anybody say what do you mean by inheritance of traits or characters? What do you mean by
characters which are passed from parents to the children or from one generation?
That is, so a characters or else traits which are transmission or else passed from parents to the next generation or else offsprings. That is what we used to call as inheritance of traits or characters. So this inheritance is the transmission. The meaning of the inheritance means a passing or transmission of genetically controlled characteristics. That is what genetically controlled traits we can say. That is only genes we used to call it as. So transmission of this genetically controlled characteristics or traits called as genes from one generation to next generation. One generation to next is only called as inheritance. So now we will describe how this Mendel studied the inheritance of characters or traits in various generations of pea plants cultivated by himself. And as well as first we will describe like what last class I told you, monohybrid inheritance, which will only concern about what, guys? Monohybrid means how many characteristics, guys? Monohybrid and dihybrid, both I told you correct last class. So monohybrid means what it is, how many characteristics?
One contrasting characteristic.
Very good. So first of all, we'll see monohybrid inheritance. So monohybrid inheritance will deals which concerns always the inheritance of a single characteristics. That is a single trait such as anything like, for example, you can take plant height. That is the single monohybrid characteristics we can take. So it will talk about a single trait. Next, we will study the dihybrid inheritance. So dihybrid inheritance will talk about what? So they will talk about two pairs of, so dihybrid inheritance will discuss about the two characteristics. So for example, if we'll take what is that, guys? One is the seed shape and as well as a seed, what it is? Color. So at a time we are talking about the shape and as well as color. So that is what we will say dihybrid inheritance, which involves how many, guys? Dihybrid inheritance means involves two characteristics or traits of such a plant, and monohybrid inheritance means only any single characteristic or trait that is involving. So now let us take here the first one which we are going to study is, all of you keep heading, monohybrid inheritance and the law of segregation. Monohybrid inheritance and the law of segregation. So totally the Mendel given 3 laws there. One is law of segregation, and the second one is law of independent assortment, and the third one is, which already we studied, law of dominance. You might be noticed it, law of dominance. So that is what we will study. That is the three laws, or else the 3 laws given by the Mendel's regarding the inheritance of transmission of characteristics from parents to the offsprings, which has been observed by a pea plant cultivation. So that is only we'll study one by one. So the first one is called as what? Monohybrid inheritance, and also you can say law of segregation. So now let us understand what do we mean by this monohybrid inheritance, and as well as the law of segregation. So first you should understand what do you mean by inheritance. Please all of you write definition of inheritance. What is inheritance, guys? Arya? Inheritance, right? Inheritance is the transmission of inheritance is the transmission of genetically controlled characteristic. Inheritance is the transmission of genetically controlled characteristic. Call to others. Inheritance is the transmission of genetically controlled characteristics, are also, we can say what? Characteristics also known as traits, from one generation to the next. From one generation to the next. So now first, what kind of inheritance we are studying, guys? We are going to study now monohybrid inheritance, and next one, the law called as law of segregation, which is suggested by Mendel. So now if you notice it, try to understand very carefully. In order to trace this inheritance of a single pair of, what do you mean by monohybrid? Just now I said, a single pair of contrasting characteristic, or single pair of contrasting trait, anything you can take. So single pair of contrasting characteristics among the pea plants he has been done. So he has been taken like tall stem and short stem. So single characteristic he has been taken, tall stem and what is that? Short stem. So these are the single inheritance. Mendel crossed the pure breed pea plants differing in these traits, and noted what is the occurrence of the offsprings of succeeding generations. So to explain this monohybrid inheritance, what kind of plants he has been taken, guys? A single characteristic inheritance of a single pair of contrasting character among the pea plants. That is what? Some plants are tall stem and another plants are short stem, and both he has been done crossbreed. So both the tall stem and as well as short stem he has been crossbreed, and he has been observed the offsprings. What is the general word, guys? What is the general word? So tallness, what is the pair of genes? Anybody can say tallness, what is the pair of genes? T or capital TT? Tallness, TT. Always, as I told, genes will work as a pairs. So we have to write not single letter. Capital TT we have to write for tallness. Now small t we have to write for what? Dwarfness, we have to write it TT. So this is the single pair of contrasting characteristics he has been taken among the pea plants. So one is tall stem, another one is short stem. So this is what he has been taken, and he observed he has been crossed these two, crossbred, and he has been observed the future generations of them. So future generations also we used to call it as what, guys? Progeny. And understand that is what new offsprings we used to call it as. Yes. So he observed this progeny of the successive generations. So now let us see what is the results happening. So now first time if you'll cross, then we used to get what generation, guys? The first offsprings we used to call it as what? Yesterday I told you. What we used to call it, Ashika? The first offsprings which is coming from the parents is called as what? We used to call it as F1 generation.
F1 generation.
Others who don't know. Now, if this F1 generation will cross each other, then what will happen? We used to get
F2 generation.
So that is what you need to understand. So now let us go to the first point, what he has been observed. So first of all, what we are studying now, monohybrid inheritance and the law of segregation. So try to understand very carefully. He has been taken how many characteristics? A single, an inheritance of a single pair of contrasting characteristics among the pea plants. That is what? Like tallness, tall stem and a short stem. Now, first what Mendel'S did means he has been selected first crossed pure breed tall pea plant. So he has been done what, guys? He has been crossed. Crossed means in the sense of what? That pollination. Understand? So crossed a pure breed tall pea plant, and with the pure breed. Next one, what will come, guys? Dwarf pea plant. So dwarf means, what do you mean by dwarf, guys? Dwarf pea plant, and found that the resultant. So what is the result he has been found? It will be surprising. So if he has been crossed this purebred tall pea plant and as well as purebred dwarf pea plant. So all the generations which is coming, that is what we used to call as all this progeny which is coming, F1 generation, completely tall plant. So generation. So here somebody is dominating. Who is dominating? Can anybody say? So whatever it is coming, all the tall plant, he has been observed that. So tall into dwarf, he has been crossed. So this crossbreeding giving all tall plants only, TT, and TT. So here we are observing two kinds of genes. Have you noticed it, guys? What is that? You might be noticed that genes are two types. So first time if you cross pure breed tall pea plant and pure breed dwarf pea plant. So whatever the progeny has been observed, all the plants are coming. What plants, guys? All the plants are coming tall plants only.
All plant.
So here, so capital T is dominating. So that is why that is called as what gene we used to call that as? Who is dominating is called as dominating gene. And even though the next gene is also present, that gene is called as what? What is the gene is called as? Types of genes here, check it. The one which is dominating is called as dominating gene. Another one is called as what?
Recessive gene.
Recessive gene. That is what I am asking, but nobody is answering because nobody is remembering. So that is the surprising results. So from this only, Mendel's concluded that the first generation or else F1 cross shows the traits only of one parent plant. What is that parent plant? What is the parent plants? All the characteristics of babies are showing only single parent plants characteristics. That is only tallness. So even though he crossed all the pure breed tall plant and pure breed dwarf plant, so whatever the F1 generation is coming, all the plants are showing the characteristics of whom, guys? Tall plant or dwarf plant? Please respond.
Tall plant.
Tall plants only. So the traits of other pea plant, the dwarf plant, did not shown up in the progeny of first generation. That is what he has been noticed it. So first time it has been crossed. Ashika, have you understand this? What he is saying? So first time when he crossed tall and dwarf plants. So what is the results he has been observed, guys? So who is a tall plant is only dominating. So from the parental generation to the F1 generation, if you notice it, so dwarf plant characteristics is not at all shown. It is completely showing what? It is completely showing the characteristics of a tall plant only, and a dwarf plant genes is not at all appears. So this is the diagram which will represent F1 generation. So first generation is called as parental generation. A pure tall plant and a pure dwarf plant he has been taken. He has been crossed so that all the plants which is appears, everything is tall. You might be see. So all the plants which is dominating by the tallness only. So that is what we used to call it as first generation, F1 generation. So from this he has been concluded what? In first generation shows the traits of what, guys? Only shows the traits of only one parent. only one parent plant. What is that parent plant? Only one parent plant, that is called as tallness. Yes, and there is no other plant, trait of other plant called as dwarfness did not shown up in the progeny of first generation. This is what the first observation made by monohybrid inheritance in the done by the Mendel'S. Please, all of you note it down. Have you understand or not? Arvind, Karthikeyan, Arya, F1 generation. So in F1 generation, who is dominating here? The dominating gene is tallness. So only tallness is appears and there is no dwarfness is present in this. Now you select any two F1 generations. So now let me take this one and this one. If you crossbreed, understand? So what I'm taking, second point, try to understand carefully. Now what I'm taking here, Padmosini, I am taking two F1 generations. So I'm crossbreed them. So let me take two F1 generations. What is that, guys? TT into TT. Understand, everyone? Please respond. So he has been crossed the plants at the first generation now. So before we crossed parental generation, so that we are getting the F1 generation. Now we are taking what? F1 generation we are crossing. So I selected any two, your choice, and I crossed. And again, if you do the cross breeding, he has been noticed it. Again, three pairs of, understand, one complete tall plant has been observed. Understand? Means completely dominating by tall plant, TT, and second generation, next offspring is capital T and small t, next offspring is capital T and small t, and the last one is appears completely dwarfness. Have you noticed it? So when you have taken F1 generation, if you will do the crossbreeding. So again here also, three plants appears to be tall. And one plant is appears to be what, guys? One plant is appears to be, please respond. One plant is appears to be dwarf plant. That is what he has been observed. So the 3/4 plants were tall and 1/4 were dwarf. So Mendel's noted that dwarf trait of the pea plant, which had understanding, seemingly disappears in the first generation progeny. If you'll notice it, in first generation progeny, no kind of dwarf plant is appears. All tall plant only appears. But when it is repeated in the second generation, Mendel said that the traits of dwarfness of one of the parent pea plant did not been lost, and it is suppressed in the first generation to be emerged in the second generation. So first generation, small tt is disappeared, means it is dominated by the tallness. But in the second generation, if you cross the F1 generation, and again this is dominating in 1/4, always 1/4 of the plants, it is a small t is dominating, so that it is again getting what, guys? It is getting the dwarf plants. So if we'll check it, the plants which has been observed by him in that 3/4 of the plants are tall plants only appears again, and 1/4 of the plants is appears dwarf plants. So the first generation, the dwarfness is disappeared, and again in the second generation, if you cross the F1 generation again, then what is happening? The first generation to be emerge in the second generation. Which one? The dwarfness. The dwarfness is only appears in the second generation from the parental generation. If you cross first generation, all tall plant will appear. If you will cross the tall plants from F1 generation progeny, then in the second generation only, the first time the dwarf plant is appears. Are you understand, everybody? So that is what you have to understand. So that is only the Mendel called that, represented this trait of dwarfness as recessive trait. Do you understand? So he has been called it as recessive trait, and he has been expressed the trait of tallness as dominated trait, because he has most of the time it is dominating. And you can see dominant trait, why he has been called means F1 generation completely tall plants, and F2 generation 3/4 of the plants are tall plants. So that is why he called capital T is called as dominant trait, and same way recessive trait means in the sense of what? Dwarfness is called as a recessive trait. So this is what the experiment with a tall and a dwarf pea plant shows the traits may be dominant or may be recessive. So this is only we used to call it as monohybrid inheritance. So in monohybrid inheritance, the characters or whatever it is transforming, the characteristics or traits, they may be what it is happening. They may be dominant trait or may be recessive trait. This is what finally the Mendel's concluded regarding the monohybrid inheritance. So please all of you, how many of you understand this? Have you understand parental generation to F1 generation and F1 generation to F2 generation? So F2 generation, how many dwarf plants is coming, guys? F2 generation, how many dwarf plants is coming? 1/4 of the plants is coming dwarf plants. So the dwarfness is disappearing in the first generation, and it is again appears in the which generation? It is appears in the second generating plants. That is what 1/4 of the plants in the second generation appears dwarfness. That is only Mendel's found it. So this is what you please need to draw the structures also neatly. So from parental generation to the F1 generation to the F2 generation. So any doubt, anybody you can tell me. So now in parental generation, all the plants are what, guys? All the plants are what in parental generation? All the plants appears to be what? All four example if you take, all are tall plants only. TT, TT, TT and TT. So that we can say no kind of dwarf plant. So the ratio is 4:0. So 0 is the dwarf plants. All plants are tall plants only. Now if you cross the F1 generation progeny, then we are getting capital TT, capital T small t, capital T small t and dwarf plant. So that what is the ratio, guys? So the capital T, the tallness is 3 and the dwarfness is 1, because 1/4 of the plants are dwarfness, it is reappearing, and 3/4 of the plants are tallness. So the ratio we can say, what is the ratio, guys? In F2 generation, the ratio produces tall and dwarf plants is the ratio is 3:1. Very important, monohybrid inheritance. Please all of you note it down. So this 3:1 is only known as the monohybrid ratio. Monohybrid ratio. Please all of you note it down. Clear everyone? Yalni? Tarani? Any doubt you can ask me. This is what monohybrid inheritance. So all of you write it. So now if you notice it, finally Mendel'S has been observed that F1 generation, no dominant of dwarfness, but in F2 generation, again the dwarfness is repeating in 1/4 of the plants. So he has been said that the represented the trait of dwarfness as recessive trait and the trait of tallness as dominant trait. That is what you need to note it down, right? Mendel's called the repressed trait of darkness as recessive trait. Mendel called the repressed trait of darkness as recessive trait and the trait of tallness as the dominant trait. That is completed, Ashika, Harini. So now, if you notice it, Mendel's also notes something that all the pea plants produced from the hybrid tall parents of F1 generation, either tall or dwarf. That is what he has been concluded. So if we take the F1 generation as a parents, anything, then the offsprings are the progeny which is produced by a crossing of hybrids F1 generation, they may be get either tall or dwarf. So no plants with the intermediate height. That is also very, very important. So he has been found either tall plants. If you cross the F1 generation, only either he is getting the tall plants or he is getting the dwarf plants. So no intermediate plants he has been found. No intermediate means, what do you mean by intermediate plants, guys? Anybody? Means in the sense of medium height. Do you understand, everyone? So either it is a dwarf plants or else it is a tall plant is producing. No kind of medium height is producing. So that is also here observed in this crossbreeding of F1 generation. Do you understand, everyone? So in between the tall plant and dwarf plant, if you say there is no kind of medium plants is producing, if you cross them either parental generation or F1 generation, no intermediate height plants is producing. So from this, he has been shows that a Mendel's experiment shows that like tallness or dwarfness are inherited independently. And do you understand? So they are not at all involving in producing of any kind of intermediate plants. So tallness is dominating, so tall plant is coming. Some either dwarfness is dominant, it is coming as a dwarf plant. So they are not crossed each other. Tallness and dwarfness is not crossed each other. So if they cross each other, then what height should become, guys? They should get medium height plants. So if medium height plants is not coming, if no medium height is coming, so from that we can say that if the tallness or dwarfness has blended each other or mixed each other, definitely medium size should come. So no medium size plants is coming, so that we can say the tallness or dwarfness are inherited independently. This is only a more important one. So because why I am saying means this independently is only called as law of segregation. So that I will explain you a little bit after a few minutes. So now try to understand this. So what he has been said, guys, anybody can say please. So he has been noticed it. If you will cross the F1 generation or parental generation, we are getting what? Either tall plant we are getting or we are getting the dwarf plant. So no intermediate height plants is coming or else medium height is coming. So means in the sense of we can conclude that there is no blending of or there is no mixing of tallness and dwarfness, so that we can say them both are inherited independently. That is the meaning of, that is only known as law of segregation. So once again, I will explain you when we are writing the definition. So this is what conclusion made by the Mendel's experiments. So he said that medium sized pea plants would have been produced if they have been blended each other. Which one? Tallness and dwarfness. So they are not mixed up each other. They are independently inherited. That is the conclusion made by the Mendel's experiment. Are you clear, everyone? Arvind? Okay. So because he has not noticed any kind of medium-sized plants. So that is why we can say confidently from his experiments, he has been suggested that no kind of mixed up or blending of tallness or dwarfness. Both are independently they are inherited in the future generations. That is what. So for this experiment, sir, he has been taken only four generations. So totally he has been taken 1064 understanding pea plants he has been taken. How many pea plants? 1064 pea plants of F2 generation he has been taken. Do you understanding, everybody? So how many F2 generation? 1000 out of total 1064 F2 generation. Mendel's found that there were around 787 tall pea plants are coming. How many pea plants? Tall pea plants, and 277 pea plants are coming as a dwarf pea plants. So that is why he said the ratio of tall to the dwarf, understanding tall plants and the dwarf plants comes under what, guys? So the ratio will comes under 787 is to 277, which is equals to, we can say, around 2.84 is to 1. So that is why it is rounding up to what, guys? rounding off to 3:1 ratio. So that is what he has been concluded. Is it okay, guys? That is how the monohybrid ratio is appears. Okay, Alni, have you understand? Okay.
Yes,
So,
sir.
this is what the results obtained by Mendel's monohybrid inheritance. And also one more thing has been found that so the ratio of tall plants to the dwarf plants in the F2 generation is 3:1. So since the tallness is the dominant trait and the dwarfness is the, what is dwarfness, guys? What is the dwarfness? Dwarfness is recessive trait. Understanding. So recessive trait. So we can say that the contrasting progeny in the F2 generation occurs in the 3 dominant and 1 recessive. Understand? So that is what 3 dominant will occurs and 1 recessive will occurs. So this is the ratio we used to call as monohybrid ratio of inheritance. Clear, everyone? Any doubt, anybody, you can ask me. So totally how many pea plants he has been taken to say this monohybrid ratio? Totally 1064 of pea plants he has been taken. Of which generation, guys? F2 generation. So in that he counted 787 pea plants are tallness, means their dominant trait, and 277 there he has been showed that pea plants are dwarfness. So if you'll find the ratio, around 2.84:1 is coming, which is equals to the 3:1. So this 3:1 is only known as the monohybrid ratio. I am giving you 1 minute time. Whatever you want to note it down from this, you understand, you please understand and write it. Any doubt, anybody, you can ask me, please. Everybody you have to ask me. If you are clear, only how to. Sutir, have you understand this one? Varshini, Ashika, any doubt, anybody, you can ask me. But it is very, very important because in exam, that is what we'll ask. So this monohybrid ratios only we used to say. And have you noticed it? As I told you, there is no kind of mixed plants is coming. Yes or no, guys? Medium height plants is coming. Please respond. So either tall plants are coming or dwarf plants are coming. There is no intermediate height. So from that, what we can conclude? They are inherited independently. Tallness and dwarfness is inherited independently. There is no kind of mixed or blended each other. So that is only we used to call as law of segregation. Now I will say you that, then you can understand with the example I will say you. So please try to write till here. Is it completed? Tell me, I will go that. I will go with that. Clear, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yes? Anyone having doubt, you can ask me. So now, please all of you write law of segregation. Law of segregation. Law of segregation. Law of segregation, right? So whatever the result of monohybrid cross. So what is the result of monohybrid cross? He has been found. Anybody can say? What is the result of monohybrid cross of Mendel's? He has been found that 3:1 ratio is forming. Means a three ratio. It is forming what? A 3 dominant and 1 recessive plants are occurs in F2 generation of the crossbreeding of F1 progeny. So now from this only the first law of inheritance, which is we used to call as law of segregation. So please all of you write first law of inheritance. First law of inheritance, or also we can call it as what, guys? Law of segregation. So now, first of all, write the definition. Later, you will understand what is the meaning of that. So as I told you already, is it any intermediate plants are forming, Arvind? No intermediate plants are forming. So from that, what we can say? No, the dwarfness and tallness is not blending each other. So that is the reason no intermediate plants are forming. Either tall plants or dwarf plants are forming. Have you noted that point? Yes or no? Please respond. And from that we can say they are tallness and dwarfness are inherited independently. That point you must be noted down, everyone. So now let us comes to here. What do you mean by, from that only we can make law of segregation. So law of segregation means, so as we know, the characteristics of an organism determined by what? Determined by the internal factors, which is occurs in pairs. That internal factors only now present what we are calling, guys? Now present what we are calling? Please respond. What we are calling now? We are calling as a genes. Yes or no? By Mendel's time, there is no word called as gene. So what he called that as? Genes, what he has been called? He called as factors. Understand?
Factors.
That is why while we are writing the Mendel's first law of inheritance, we are not supposed to say the genes. So as we know, genes always occurs as a pairs, yes or no? So here we'll use as a factors. So according to the Mendel's first law of inheritance, what it will say means, so whatever the characteristic or trait of an organism, whatever the traits of an organism, if you're observing, it is observed by, determined by the internal factors which occurs how they will occurs, guys? Is it occurs in single or pairs? Which occurs in pairs, understand? But if you notice it, in the pair, only one of the pair of such factor can be represented in a single gamete. Means maybe if you notice it, the tallness and tallness is crossing with the dwarfness and dwarfness. So when they are forming the F1 generation, so only single gamete, when during the like pollination or reproduction, we can say only single pair of such a factor can be present in a